Good afternoon, dear students. Today we are taking up the play Mother's Day. Mother's Day is a one-act play written by J.B. Priestley, who was a British novelist, playwright and essayist from 1894 to 1984. We encounter following characters here in this play. First is Mrs. Annie Pearson. She is the mother of the family or mother of the house. Then we have George Pearson, who is the husband, Doris Pearson, who is the daughter, Cyril Pearson, who is the son, and we have another important character, that is Mrs. Fitzgerald. She is the neighbor. So Mrs. Annie Pearson is the mother, who is pleasant looking woman but very worried looking woman in her 40s. Then we have George Pearson, who is the husband, who is nearly in his 50s. He is heavy built, decent but pompous. Then we have Doris Pearson. Doris Pearson is the daughter. She is a pretty girl in her early 20s. Then we have Cyril Pearson, who is the son of the family, or son of Annie and George, who is masculine counterpart of Doris. Then we have Mrs. Fitzgerald, who is the neighbor. She is the neighbor who is a fortune teller, who knows some basics of magic. She is older, heavier and strong woman and a sinister personality. The action of this play takes place in the living room of the Pearsons' house in London. The time is, it is early autumn afternoon, and the scene is set in the living room of the Pearson family. The play begins, the play portrays the practical experience of a mother, that is Mrs. Pearson, Mrs. Annie Pearson. On a daily basis, her kids always disrespect and disregard her. In her own home, she is treated as a slave. Not only her children ill-treat her, but her husband also has completely turned a blind eye towards her. Mrs. Pearson's life turns when she meets Mrs. Fitzgerald, and she discusses her family members and their terrible behavior. Mrs. Fitzgerald recommends her to exchange personalities so as to teach her family a good lesson. At first, Mrs. Pearson didn't agree, but after some time, some more encouragement, she agrees to switch bodies. After that, Mrs. Fitzgerald casts a spell and swaps her personality with Mrs. Pearson. In a matter of seconds, their personalities switch, and Mrs. Pearson, who was calm and composed, is now smoking and drinking. And Mrs. Fitzgerald is now sitting idle. After some time, Mrs. Pearson goes to her home, and Mrs. Pearson, who is actually Mrs. Fitzgerald now, okay, she goes to her home, and Doris enters the living room of the Pearson family. She hands her mother a dress and asks her to iron it, as she has to go on a date with Charlie Spence. As she has to go on a date with her boyfriend, whose name is Charlie Spence. She even objects her mother smoking, and when she asks her, Mrs. Pearson replies very harshly, because Mrs. Pearson is now no more Mrs. Pearson, she is Mrs. Fitzgerald. She, replies very harshly and advises her to do her work herself. Further, the mother makes fun of her daughter's boyfriend. Afterwards, Doris feels miserable, ashamed, and starts crying, when her mother insults and rebukes her. After this, her son, Cyril, enters, asks his mother hurriedly, if his tea is ready. On which Mrs. Pearson, who is actually Mrs. Fitzgerald, refuses and advises him to prepare it himself. After seeing his mother's reaction and his sister crying, he raises his voice. When the kids talk about being, worn out throughout the day or after the hard work, after the, day's hard work, the kids, the siblings start talking to each other and discuss the day, that how it has been a very hectic day for them, without acknowledging that it has been hectic for their mother as well. So mother, Mrs. Pearson or mother makes it very clear to both of them that they all will work equally from that day onwards. And she will not work, on weekends, and she will party with her friends, particularly on Saturdays and Sundays, because she is going to take those 2 days as off. At that point, Mrs. Pearson enters the house and expresses, Mr. Pearson enters the house, George Pearson enters the house and expresses his surprise on seeing her wife drinking and smoking. He is surprised, he is aghast, he is taken aback. He objects, and Mrs. Pearson makes him realize that if he can drink, then she can too. Further, she tells him that instead of spending his time with his wife, he is spending time, with people who are making fun of him behind his back in the club. Mrs. Pearson, on seeing her family being insulted, asks Mrs. Fitzgerald to stop all this drama. However, Mrs. Fitzgerald doesn't, let her speak until she teaches all of them a good lesson, the lesson of respecting and honoring their mother. Soon after, they switch their personality again. And after that, the son, daughter, and husband learn their lesson and start respecting the mother of the house. So this is the summary of Mother's Day. Now let's take up certain important issues that this play raises. The play raises many serious issues. The first and foremost is proper appreciation of a housewife's role and responsibilities. Those who work 8 hours a day and 40 hours a week treat the housewife as an unpaid domestic servant who must carry out their orders. They neither request her nor thank her for her services. The second important issue that this play raises is the reciprocity of love and gratitude towards the mother or the wife. The husband, son, and daughter leave, as we have seen in the play, leave the lady of the house alone every night and go out to enjoy themselves in their several different ways. They do not take any notice of her and have become thoughtless and selfish. The mother's excessive love, care, and promptness to serve them also actually spoils them. The problems the play raises are serious. The treatment is, of course, comic in this play. The playwright adopts an unusual method to resolve the issues. He takes the help of magic. Magic, because Mrs. Fitzgerald is a person who knows certain things about magic, elementary knowledge about magic, and she has learnt it in the East. Incantation of a magical spell helps in the interchange of the personalities of these two ladies. Now, Mrs. Pearson, with the strong and sinister personality of Mrs. Fitzgerald, gives rough treatment to the daughter, son, and husband, respectively. Her stern looks and commanding tone suggest to them that she can be really tough. The spoiled members are brought round by the heavy dose of exposure of reality to them. They agree to stay and help in preparing the supper while the mother has a talk with her husband. The resolution of the issue seems far-fetched and unnatural, but extreme means have to be adopted in disaster management. Now, let's have a look at the moral. The moral of this play, it revolves around appreciating, respecting, and acknowledging the unconditional love, the selfless sacrifice, and significant role that mothers play in our lives. It teaches us the importance of expressing our gratitude, this is what they want, towards them, and valuing their immense contributions. They simply want our time. They do not want anything else from us. Simply our time, our love, and our gratitude occasionally. Now we'll have a look at the significance of the title Mother's Day. The title Mother's Day is justified, by the end of the play when the insensitive Pearson family realizes the importance of a selfless mother. It is a great day for Mrs. Pearson, who doesn't get the love and affection that she rightly deserves from her family. If we look at the theme or the themes, there could be many themes in this play. The most important theme that comes out, strikingly from this play is the situation of mothers. The situation of mothers in their households. They are devoted to their family and fulfill their duties with sincerity and devotion. But this mother is never aided, this mother is never acknowledged, this mother is never thanked. This is the theme of Mother's Day. Thank you very much.